Good morning.
Good morning, Miss Dean. How are
Oh,
you?
I am good. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you.
All right. Okay, so let's do a quick mic check.
hmm
You can hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
All right. And I hear you clearly. So we're going to uh, hold our positions and begin.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right. Okay, so welcome to Advocacy Arena, the place to bring awareness and solution oriented focus to important issues in our society. Today, I am here with Dani, host of Twitter Spaces' Fourth Estate series. Thank you for joining me today, Dani, and helping to educate and inspire us with your work. Um, I have a question I'd like to get our conversation started with, and I'd like for you to tell the audience when and how you got interested in politics.
Yes. Good morning, Miss Dean. Thank you for having me today. I actually started becoming more aware of politics. Um, I would say around the late 90s, early 2000s. Um, it was really regarding, the ending of the President Clinton um, administration and going into the 2000 presidential election. And being in the state of Florida, you know, it was the first time that I realized that our state was becoming a punchline of a joke. Florida not being able to count their votes properly, it needing to go to the Supreme Court. At the time, I was 17 during that election, so I wasn't able to vote. So it was really interesting to be a spectator, to kind of watch as others made decisions on my life and on what would affect their lives. And that's really when I started to pay attention.
Okay. And how would you say, like, I know that we have spoken before. You talked about being in school and your exposure to politics in that during that time frame. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so education became important for me. Um, Really because of what the governor at the time, Governor Jeb Bush, did to the state of Florida. The competencies test that he put in place, it didn't even matter if the student was passing straight A's, was a good student. If they could not pass this one test, then they would not be able to advance to the next grade. And that did affect a lot of my friends that were in school. And so it gave me a first look of how politics affect education. And it affected me and my friends, even though we had nothing to do with electing Jeb Bush as the governor of our state at the time.
So, like, how, I know that you talked a little bit about your teachers and having classes. Did you get any exposure
Oh, yeah.
or understanding in school about politics and what was going on there?
Yes, absolutely. Especially my senior year, which was the 2000 presidential election year. I had an English teacher and my economics teacher. They would hold these mock debates. And they were really into pushing any student that was of the age to go ahead and vote. And so we started seeing, posters and signs around the school saying, by choosing not to vote, you vote. And these mock debates were centered around how important your vote was, why it should matter to you, even at 17, going into 18, and why it will continue to matter going forward, because politics affect different aspects of your life. If
Mm-hmm.
not now, then definitely later down the road.
Right. So, having that introduction and understanding, early in high school,
Mm-hmm.
uh, how would you say it has evolved from then till now?
Um, I was really only focused on the state level or local level. I was always interested in the mayor. I got more interested in who was representing me in Congress, and in the Senate, and obviously the presidential election. But I started to learn more about what position or what politician and what powers they each have, right? Your mayor has different power than what the governor has. The governor has different powers than what the state legislature has, as opposed to Congress and Senate in DC. And obviously, even when it comes to appointing judges, right? Oftentimes they are appointed by the governor in the state of Florida. And then when they're up for reelection, you start to look at some of the cases that they ruled on. And so it just kind of expanded as I gotten older and as I became more aware.
Right. And so, having started to get that understanding, I know that we talked about, like, you're in the state of Florida, and you had an election there, like you talked about being the butt of the jokes, and that was the election of what, 2000?
Yes.
Yeah, I have some feelings about Florida because of that. Al Gore is
Yeah.
is a hometown guy. I helped work, not like directly at high levels in his campaign, but very actively involved. I had a relative who did, and I was at that gala when we thought we should be celebrating a win. So I was always side-eyeing Florida, and they're hanging Chad situation over there.
I know. They're still floating out in the Atlantic, Miss D.
I wish
They're
someone
still
would
there.
find them, like, look at where our country could be,
right.
If we had had him in office, like, the climate issues and things that could have been addressed. But, we are where we are. And because we're where we are, I know that we met on social media, in Twitter Spaces. And I'd like for you to tell our audience a little bit about some excellent work that I know that you have done, and that is a Twitter Spaces series called The Fourth Estate. Can you tell me about your motivation for that? What inspired you to do that? Tell people a little bit about what it is and how you were, or why you were inspired to do it.
Yes, thank you. So I've always been interested in really good journalism. And I think that's been lacking for a really long time. And Spaces gave me the opportunity to kind of voice my frustration. And during the summer, I believe it was mid-July, I was really disappointed with the reporting on our VP Harris. And I decided to open up a space. And I targeted the media because I felt like they were doing a poor job in their reporting of her. I'm not asking for, glowing reviews. I'm not asking for a puff piece, but I am asking for fair coverage. And I don't think that she was getting that. And so when I started the space, it turns out I wasn't the only one. Others came in and we started voicing our opinion. And I decided then that I would start a series on it. And it has taken me on this wild ride where we were able to examine different aspects of journalism, journalism in radio. How do conservatives approach journalism with talk radio? And how that also became an extension of Fox News. And then we looked into satire journalism as well. And then we also had a series within that series where we examined how journalism was during the Clinton years, right? I think that was a turning point. There was a paradigm shift that happened. And so trying to figure out, what is it about these two individuals, Bill and Hillary, that you guys are reporting the way that you are? I understand they're public figures. I understand he's the president, but there's a level of kind of being just crude with how you report on him, never giving him his wins. You didn't do that with Reagan. You didn't do that with Poppy Bush, and you didn't do that with Nixon. But for one reason or another, you've made the decision to scandalize everything he did and trying to find the root cause of that and how that has then shaped 20, 30 years of journalism going forward. And you
Mm-hmm.
see it, I think, highlighted the best when you look at Fox News, right? That was their bread and butter, the Clintons. And so a lot of journalists made their money off of them. And it's unfortunate because I don't think that they ever really got a fair amount of coverage of when they got it right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an indictment on journalism and really not respecting the profession enough to just provide people with the truth.
Yes, and you posed some very um, good questions, and some members of your audience did, and in that series and the conversation, and I believe one of them, one of the first ones that caught my eye was, is journalism failing us? And what would
Right.
you say from the conversation that you get? Or I think the question was, is it dead or is it failing?
Yeah. It was actually the first question that I posed. Is American journalism dead? And that's what spearheaded. That was the very first space. And I actually got a little bit of a pushback that
Mm-hmm.
said it's not dead, but it is failing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's almost there.
Mm-hmm.
And someone did point out the good journalism, right? Because the
Mm-hmm.
way that we combat bad journalism or bad media press is to start looking for the trusted news sources that we can go to discredit the ones that are pushing propaganda, that is pushing scandals. Um, and that's just not providing any truths. It's not backed by facts or data. And so we do still use journalism, good journalism, to fight bad journalism. And so that was an interesting point that someone in the space pointed out to me. So it's not dead yet, but many of it is failing us. And how do we combat that? What do we need to do? Do we need to be um, do the general public need to have more of an input in the newsroom so we get to decide what news that wants to be covered? um, does it mean that we cancel our subscriptions?
Mm-hmm.
We already know that many newspapers around the country, you know they're closing,
Right.
or they don't even print as often as they used to. There's a reason for that. And it's not just because of online social media presence. It's also because people don't know if they can trust it anymore. And I
Right.
think that's the biggest um, indictment against what we've seen for the last 20, 30 years.
So would you say that series that you had um, made a difference? Well, first, let's back up,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not sure you told us exactly why you were inspired to do that space. And Twitter Spaces is much like a kind of a live podcast on the Twitter social the Twitter app, which is the social media app, and you can have live conversations with people. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about Twitter Spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So, what inspired you to start that,
Um,
first space?
right. So it's been on my mind for a while, or it was on my mind for a while. I have been disappointed with the media for many years, not even just, recently, going back 5 years, going back 10 years. And
Mm-hmm.
you see how they report on different issues, political figures, current events, natural disasters, foreign affairs, internationally.
We're talking about natural disasters. I know we talked about Katrina and how it was covered.
Yes, yes. And being from the state of Florida and having Hurricane Katrina hit us first as a category 1, we knew what to expect and we know how to prepare. So to see it go across the state, move across the Gulf, strengthen back up to a category 5, and watch how it completely decimated the Gulf Coast area. And not just Louisiana, right? Not just New Orleans, but Mississippi,
Mm-hmm.
Alabama,
Mm-hmm.
and the lack of media coverage, the lack of help. And it's also
And how they covered. most of the people who were affected most severely, Louisiana, largely being African Americans, the coverage was different. It felt different. Yeah.
And it's actually how I got to know who Anderson Cooper was.
Okay.
Because if you remember, he questioned the Louisiana governor at the time, who happened to be a Democrat, and he held her feet to the fire. He was asking, where is everybody? Everybody in the Senate is patting themselves on the back because you were able to pass this emergency relief, but the people are still here. They're literally sitting on their rooftops with the help sign, and nobody is coming. What is happening in Washington? And I was like, oh, that is what I like.
So who would you say, I know you brought up Anderson Cooper, who is a great journalist, and who would you say some of your other influences are in journalism or in the political arena?
So growing up in my mother's household, we watched 60 Minutes religiously Sunday nights. So it was Ed Bradley, Morley Schaefer. It was also the special pieces that Oprah Winfrey would do. I know that, she's often associated with her talk show, but she is a still great journalist. You had Gwen Ifill with PBS.
Oprah, you had graduated from TSU here in Tennessee.
And then you had Gwen Ifill with PBS. You had Soledad O'Brien with CNN. You had Ann Curry, Katie Couric. You had really Barbara Walters, who we just lost. There were so many great journalists that I had to look. Brian Williams, Tom Brokaw, Ted Koppel in the middle of the night. He would come on ABC. And then Peter Jennings,
Yes.
These
all
are giants. They were great. And you never knew.
Rather.
Yes. And you never knew what their political leanings were because they were just interested in reporting the facts. Wherever the facts led, that is what they were going to report on. And I think that's is something that is severely lacking in what journalism is today. And so that's my Mount Rushmore.
Okay, awesome, and a beautiful one it is. And I think they would all hold up, within time. I think they are definitely giving us a comparison, for what's going on today and what journalism used to be like. So are there any political figures, people who hold political offices that you may be inspired by or guided by?
I was definitely inspired by Hillary. When we were covering the Clintons in the Fourth Estate series, I have always loved her. Voted for her in 2016. But watching the documentary on Hulu, listening to her in her own words, understanding what the media was like back then, how she was targeted, the way that she could never do anything right. It was always an angle that she was playing because she was all about, trying to get as much power as she could. And I'm like, she just wanted to give everyone health care in America. She wanted to make sure that everyone had a piece of the pie. Everyone is welcome at the table. And to see the way that she has been victimized and targeted, why? I don't understand it. So
do you feel like it maybe that is because she is a woman and she dare be so intelligent and so capable?
Absolutely. When you watch that documentary, you understand, okay, yeah,
and I know
she has some balls on her is the only way I know how to say it. She has some gumption, right?
Yes.
She's not afraid. She was one of the first ones in spite the men, in spite, George Bush and our favorite Barack Obama. She went right at Putin and told him and the American people and the world what he was doing with those elections.
It's kind of why he didn't like her so much.
Right. She called it out, and she called it out in real time.
Right.
And
And
you
I
got to
know,
appreciate that.
absolutely, we do. And I know that we can see similarities in what they did to her and what they are trying to do to our current vice president.
VP Harris, absolutely.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I feel like for 30 years, Fox News, conservative talk media, radio, they made Hillary Clinton the boogeyman.
mm-hmm.
And after 2016, she won that election, and she was denied the right to that election to run to govern the United States. She went home.
Mm-hmm.
She left Washington. She went to go continue to be a grandmother and a mother and a wife. And to those that wanted her help, her assistance, she was going to campaign with them. She was going to raise money for them. And she's living her best life. She's released books. She's working with her daughter on different projects. She's giving interviews. She looks good. I mean, and she left. And it, for the first time in 30 years, Fox News no longer had a boogeyman. So they had to replace it with somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like VP Harris is that person now.
Mm-hmm.
She is not only a woman, but she's a Black woman.
Okay, a
She
great
is,
target for them. Hmm?
yeah, she's a woman who didn't have children of her own.
Mm-hmm.
She's a woman who married later in life. So she was already successful on her own before she got married.
Mm-hmm.
She is a Black woman. She is a Southeast Asian woman.
Mm-hmm.
She was a prosecutor. I mean, the list is long.
Another very capable woman. Okay.
And I believe she didn't fit the mold of what other vice presidents were.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't like that.
Right.
And I think they are showing, this is why we get the reports on how she laughs, right? This is why we get the reports. Oh, did you know she spent X amount of dollars on that French pot when she was over with Macron speaking French over there?
I think that was the story that kind of drove you over the edge.
It was.
Right?
It was.
And caused you to say, what's going on with journalism?
Yep, it was.
What are you talking about?
Like, what are we supposed to do with this? Okay, she's not allowed to buy a pot. Is she not allowed to speak French? Is she not allowed to laugh?
Okay, and why is this a story? Okay.
Yeah. Like, what am I to get from this knowledge?
Exactly. So let me ask you, Dani, do you feel like the work you have done around this very, very informative Twitter series, do you feel like it's made a difference?
Great question. But it's not for me to decide, really. I think that to those who I might have inspired, it's for them to decide. I try to put out the content that I want to see, that I want to know more about. I mean, first things first, I'm nosy. I want to know what's going on in our government. I want to know at the local level, at the state level, at the national level. I want to understand better internationally. So I look for the facts, because to me, good journalism is backed by facts and by data. And so to anyone who might have followed me, who might have been inspired by me, I tried to lead with that. When we did the series, it was really important that we vetted who we were talking about, the news articles that we were pulling and that we were going to post up into the nest, because it made a difference. Because if anything, those facts and data, under scrutiny, they stand up. Over time, they stand up. And that's the best part of journalism, no matter what kind of journalism it is. And so it's not really for me to decide. I guess it's for whoever I might have maybe inspired.
Yes, I do think that your work made a difference, because I think people were kind of clamoring for more series from you. ended. So I would say that's a sign that it made a difference and that people were getting a lot from it. And I would encourage anyone, if you're on Twitter, look Dani up. And the Fourth Estate series, we will be giving you her Twitter handle. These are recorded spaces. They are terrific, very informative, very engaging conversation around journalism, just the different aspects of it, journalism today. And it's really, vitally important that we speak to this because, as you so often remind us, that it is one of the few things that is in the Constitution, and it's important for us to hold those who are attempting this work to account. And I would like to know, because I certainly think that you made a difference, and I hope if you don't continue that, I would like to see you continue something, because I think you have a lot to offer us. We have a lot to learn from you. I think you were doing so well with this work. You got dubbed Dani Lou Hamer, and I think it's a very apt nickname. So I want to see you continue, and I would like to know if you have given any thought to what your future goals and plans are around that, or your work in advocacy, or whether that's political advocacy or not. Just tell us a little bit about what you're thinking about doing.
Thank you. And just one last point too I want to mention.
Sure.
I think that the reason that people gravitated toward the space or towards that series is because we're still hungry for the truth, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Even with viewership down in cable news, subscription is down with newspapers, people still seek it out. And before it, kind of goes by the wayside, I would hope that there's enough good journalism that can rise above or, cancel out all the noise and all the static of bad journalism, or journalism that's just based on sensation, because of that kind of journalism does not last. And so going forward, it'll probably be more of that. If I continue with the Fourth Estate series, it'll be more about highlighting the truth, because that's never wrong. That's always in style. That's how you build credibility. That's how you build integrity. Can it stand the test of time? And the reason why the journalists that I mentioned earlier, they're my favorite, because their work spoke for itself all these years later. How long has Peter Jennings been gone? How long has Gwen Ifill been gone? But we miss her because she was that great. And so you would want that whatever work that you put out, be proud of it, because you know that you've taken the time to do it right, not do it fast. And I think that's the issue when it comes to journalism now. You want to be the first to report it instead of being the most accurate to report it.
Right. It's more about breaking news than actual factual.
And if you're breaking news every single day, looking at you, Ari Melber, on MSNBC, right?
Oh, I know.
Just at the top of the hour, it's always breaking news. If it's always breaking news, eventually it's no longer news anymore.
Exactly. I mean, how much breaking news can there be 365 out of the year, when a lot of the stories have been, carried by the previous host on his.
Yeah. And that is something to examine, the 24-hour news cycle. Because growing up even, there was a time you turned it off, and now we don't have that option anymore. It's going to always be around. And I think the biggest malpractice that we've seen, just even after this midterm election, is George Santos. And look at that information was sitting there all this time. Like, no one even had to, dig deep. That information was surface. So if anybody ever decided to just go into that district in New York and just maybe start asking a few questions. Start asking that GOP newspaper that backs GOP candidates in that area why they didn't back George Santos.
Mm-hmm.
Out of everybody, they refused to.
Investigative work, huh?
Yes, because it stands up. And that information was there all this time, but nobody reported on it. And it's unfortunate because he was able to con that district, those voters. And so they're voting for a man that does not exist. Whatever his real name is, whatever persona he was able to make up, they were fed a lie. And if journalism had done its job, he probably would not be elected. And now here it is, he is elected, he's been sworn in, and he's been given committees.
Mm-hmm.
And the journalism asks Kevin McCarthy, what are you going to do about it? And he's like, I'm not going to do nothing. Why is that for him to decide? Why not take it back to his voters
mm-hmm.
in his district?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the part that eats me up inside, because I'm sure if the voters were armed with that information, that election cycle, it might have been a little bit different for George Santos, or
mm-hmm.
whatever name that he's going by, right?
Right. I mean, because literally every day there is a new revelatory lie that is uncovered. Just this morning, I was watching one that I guess appeared last night about him, interviewing and claiming that he had been accosted and his shoes stolen. The interview was by, I think, a foreign podcast or something, but they went to check the facts in New York because this is where he said it happened. And there are no receipts. There's no evidence of this. So like you said, with a little bit of journalism, this might have been avoided.
Yeah. But going forward, it will probably be more of getting more knowledge on the international level when it comes to journalism. That's not an area that I'm too familiar with. But also just with politics too. I'm not well versed in geopolitics. I kind of just sit back, listen, and take it all in. I would like to be more well versed in it. So that's an area that I could probably look into going further.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we look forward to whatever work that you do, supporting it, amplifying it, and I am certainly looking forward to having you back here on Advocacy Arena, sharing your work and some other passions that I know that you have, letting people get to know you. And I want to thank you again today for sitting down and sharing a little bit of your work with us. And we're going to wrap our interview at this point. But before we go, I would like an opportunity for you to share with our listeners where they can find you and your work on the Fourth Estate series.
Yes. So I am only on Twitter. I don't have any other social media platforms. I am at Miss D_83.
And that is Miss with MS. So
yes.
MSDEE
_. Yes. 83.
All right. So look Dani up and check out and search for her Fourth Estate series. You will not be disappointed. And again, Dani, I just want to say thank you. Keep doing the great work that you're doing. And if you'd like to have any last words, here's an opportunity.
I want to thank you so much for this opportunity, Ms. D. I greatly appreciate it. The Fourth Estate series, the very first space that I had on it is actually my pinned tweet. So once you go to my profile, you should see it. And all the other spaces that we did regarding the Fourth Estate should be up underneath that one. So by all means, we welcome all voices and all opinions. Feel free to leave an opinion or a view of how you felt about the space. And then hopefully look out for more information about what I might do next. But I want to thank you again so much for this opportunity, Ms. D.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure as always. having an opportunity to sit down and talk with you, and I allow other people to get to know you. So I am wishing you a wonderful rest of your day. Looking forward to having you back here again with us in Advocacy Arena. So thank you, folks. Thank you, Dani. And I wish you all a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.